I was discussing dreams and the dreams I had and how my stepfather tried to beat the dreamer out of me and how so many people like the social worker when we lived in the projects who asked me what I wanted to be when I graduated from school, and I said I wanted to be a businessman, a globe-trotting businessman. I wanted to travel around the world as a business person, and she said, that's if you could just graduate from high school and get a job at one of the local plants here, you will have already beat the odds. It's great to have goals and dreams, but they need to be realistic. But as I talked through all those things and as I looked back, is that my problem wasn't that I dreamed too big. My problem was that I dreamed too small.
You spent 33 years with ExxonMobil. I hope I have that
Correct.
number
Yep.
correctly. Um, what inspired you to write Playing from the Rough? And what does the title mean to you personally?
From an inspiration standpoint, I really wanted to write it for three reasons. One was to honor my mother, who raised
Mhm.
eight kids, raised us all in
Mm,
poverty. But because she did such a great job and sacrificed so much and instilled such strong principles in us, not a single one of us has spent a day in poverty as an adult. Second reason
mm,
was for my kids, my wife and I, for our kids, so that they would know
mhm,
who we were, where we came from, and what we stood for. And then finally, and
mm,
some could consider this a little corny, but for our country, it's my hope that every person who reads Playing from the Rough will find a piece of themselves in one of the stories. And if we
mm,
can
yeah,
connect through our common humanity, then it pushes out any space for hate. I think that if
mm,
we can connect on a human or common humanity level, there's no safe harbor for hate at all. And I think
mm.
we can uh, go a lot further and do a lot better in a world that we can reduce the amount of hate that exists. So for those three reasons, that was my those were my reasons or my inspiration. And the title comes from the idea that in golf, sometimes your ball ends up in the rough. Other times it's on the nice fairways. And it's easier to make birdies and pars from the fairway, but not impossible to also make them from the rough. As for me, I was born in the rough, born into a life without privilege, with lots of challenges. But those circumstances didn't define what was possible for me. So playing from the rough really illustrates that no matter what our circumstances are, we can still succeed. That life's about resilience and about overcoming the challenges we have, not necessarily the challenges. Everybody has challenges. And so it's up to us to figure out how to overcome those challenges to achieve the things in life that we want to achieve or to be able to live our most blessed and best life.
Absolutely. Several things are going through my mind as you're speaking is number one is that, we often talk about even just within our small groups and things, within our community and let alone professionally, is that what's most important is not the result, but
Mhm.
the journey you take. And it's in the journey of where your growth actually is where your growth comes. And we even explain this even to our own children. And that's why we tell them to embrace the journey. And so when you talk about the rough, there's always rough patches or there's a rough
Right.
in the journey,
Exactly.
right? And so that came to my mind as you were speaking as well. But what was I was curious about if you wanted to share is what interesting discussions have come out of your book, even within your own family, with your own children, that you could share?
So what I find surprising because I felt I really described and talked about my life a lot with our kids, and I know that there were a lot of people around me that didn't really understand my backgrounds and my origin story, but our kids, they knew that I grew up poor, but they didn't know about the some of the other challenges, like my stepfather, eh, beating me, the things we overcame with that. My son, when he read the story, understood much greater the reason it was so important for me to fulfill the promises that my wife and I would make to them so that they know that our word means something. So we talk about those types of things, and that those discussions come out of that, why that's so important. And then what we were talking about just a moment ago, so our kids, a discussion my son and I have and had, and I'm not so sure we totally agree on it, but I grew up um, where I was outside the system, grew up without privilege,
Mhm.
and so for me the challenge was, how do I fit into the system? How do I become a part of the system? Whereas for my son, he sort of grew up in the system. And so his, I think, perspective is more, how do I fight the system? How do I make the world a better place by fighting the system? Mine was, how do I make the world a better place? How do I make my life better and the world a better place by being able to fit into the system because I felt that I didn't fit in. And
Mm.
so he also wants to change the world, but his perspective is looking at it from what all is wrong with the system from the outside, and how do I fight that system so that the world can be improved. So that's an interesting discussion and sort of reflection on what I talk about too in Playing from the Rough.
That's a very good point. Immediately, I think about the discussions, from our children's perspective as well, and what we've trained them, how to think through um, making sure the system will work for
Mm.
you, or how do you dismantle what's in the system um, that's not equitable or justified or right, you know, um, and giving them that boldness and courage to do so, either with their voice or with a process or helping them manage through a
Right.
situation, right? So, that's good.
Yeah, so I think, but what's also been interesting, Lisa, is that it's opened up discussions with other people who, on the one hand, they find things, as I had hoped, that that are that are similar in life, uh, and but on the other hand, they look at how different my life was from theirs, and somehow we ended up in the same places. And that's been a discussion with a lot of other people on, how does that happen, and how did you get from the deprivation, um, that you face to where you are now, to where we're in the same place. And to some people, um, there are stereotypes of who we are and what's possible for us. And you mentioned, before we started the podcast, I think about your husband growing up in Huntsville, Alabama, and growing up around Black professionals, the type of neighborhoods that unfortunately we don't really have many of that exist today, where
Mm,
you have those role models. But when you look at all of the reasons that people give and all of the things that people say as to why someone doesn't succeed, like 99.9% of those things existed in my life. But yet
mm,
I ended up been a place where people who had a lot of privilege also ended up. And so when I said earlier, to many, that's being a unicorn, a mythical being that doesn't exist. And it's interesting in that rather than sort of confront the stereotypes, the person tries to rationalize and explain it, whereas the explanation is maybe a misunderstanding of the stereotypes that exist. Maybe it's the suspension of the beliefs that you have, is letting go of some of the things that you have believed and held, uh, and that makes it easier. So those have been interesting discussions to have also.
Mhm, mhm. I can see that. You don't want the stereotypes to hold you back to the greater promise or greater calling that is even on
Yeah,
your life. We often can trap our own selves in
right.
stereotypes, right? Let alone those who, you don't want those kind of things to hold you
And
back,
we can
right?
we can hold back
And to break
we can
anything of
hold back
territory. Yes,
opportunities for others because of the stereotypes we hold.
absolutely.
And instead of letting go of those stereotypes and then giving people the opportunity to either fail or succeed, um, that
Yes.
those stereotypes sort of sometimes can inhibit that. So it's been interesting to talk about those issues. And my hope is that people will recognize, and I write this in the book, and I probably should have explained it more in the book, but in the book I say I have no special talents, that the only gift I have is one that's forged from a life where even the simplest of things were hard. Perseverance.
Mm.
I don't quit. But
Mhm,
when I talk about
mhm,
not having special talents, I mean, I was not I didn't excel at anything. And so the message I try to bring across in Playing from the Rough is that you don't have to be special or extraordinary in that sense to do extraordinary things. That,
mm,
we look at people who succeed and we think it's because simply they have some special gift or talent. And my point is, no, I didn't have any special gift or talent. I just never quit. The challenges that you
mhm,
face, figure out a way to overcome them. And
mhm,
just a regular person uh, can succeed, can do
mhm,
extraordinary things. And that gift can
mhm,
be just the gift of being able to never quit or to work hard. It doesn't mean that you are some great athlete or you can sing or you can act or dance or whatever. Um,
mhm,
just
mhm.
never quit. And
I could not agree with you more. It reminds me, I think someone posed a question in an interview to, President Obama, actually, and they said, "What do you think is the greatest characteristic of success?" I'm
you
sort of
know,
paraphrasing here, Jimmy, but basically his answer was,
yeah,
"Just finish." And literally, that was his 2 words. He said, "Just
yeah.
finish." So basically, it's what you're saying.
Don't quit.
Don't quit.
Right.
Persevere. Finish the task before you, because that's when you will get the next task. That's when you will get the next thing, right? Everything builds up to the right? But
Just
just
finish.
finish.
Just figure out a way, figure out a way to finish. And the things that you will learn by doing that,
Mhm,
the problem solving skills that you'll pick up when just identifying the challenges and figuring out a way to uh, to get
mhm,
beyond to get beyond those challenges. One of the other things I write is that, um, and this is where role models do help, and where when you can see yourself in a place that others who may be similar to you have been and have traveled through.
mhm,
Uh, but
mhm,
the idea is that in order to really make the sacrifices that you have to make, because anything that's worth achieving, it's going to take hard work, it's going to take sacrifice.
Mhm.
But often the quitting comes because the person doesn't believe that hard work or those sacrifices will pay off. And so they quit. The important aspect is to believe that it's possible for you. And there's nothing really magical about believing, except the believing allows you to work as hard as you need to work because you believe it will actually pay off. If you don't believe your hard work's going to pay off or your sacrifices are going to pay off, then it's easier to quit. But if you believe it's gonna pay off, it doesn't matter how hard it is. You keep going, you keep figuring out a way to solve the problems, how to overcome the challenges. So it's it's to bel finding within yourself that belief that all things are possible for you.
All
Yeah.
things are possible if you just
Right.
believe. And it is, and I think the key word is continuing to believe. You know, I was sitting in a study, just yesterday actually, and, they were talking about how to keep your belief or your faith at a certain level at all
Right.
times, right? Because, I mean, we're all human. We can get a little bit, you know, weakened by the things we see in the world or experiences or something that happens or someone said. But they said constantly keep something in your ears that you're hearing something, whether it's testimonies of those who did something you're trying to do, or testimonies of those who just did something hard, or testimonies of whatever you are trying to believe for. Keep it going. Hearing increases your faith. Hearing increases your belief. And, it just reminds me of what you said, we gotta keep believing, but we also have to surround ourselves, right, with what that is and hear the right
Right.
things. Listen to those
You know,
things.
I'm often so I dreamed big as a kid, and often I heard that my dreams were too big, that I was being unrealistic.
Mm. Yeah.
And now at 67, turned 67 a week and a half or so ago, a week
I
ago.
cannot believe you're
But at
67.
67, I um
Oh my goodness.
I it really occurred to me. I was giving a talk at the Savannah Book Festival, and I was discussing dreams and the dreams I had and how my stepfather tried to beat the dreamer out of me, and how so many people like the social worker when we lived in the projects who asked me what I wanted to be when I graduated from school, and I said I wanted to be a businessman, a globe-trotting businessman. I wanted to travel around the world as a business person, and she said, that's if you could just graduate from high school and get a job at one of the local plants here, you will have already beat the odds. It's great to have goals and dreams, but they need to be realistic. But as I talked through all those things, and as I looked back, is that my problem wasn't that I dreamed too big. My problem was that I dreamed too small.
Small.
The only limitation on us really is our own imagination, right? It's our own imagination. Everybody faces challenges, and to each person, the challenges they face are daunting. It may not be daunting to someone else, but to each person, their challenge is daunting. And so our imagination sets what we can achieve, and the challenges are just things we have to overcome in order to achieve it. They're not the things that determine whether we achieve it or not. They're just the things that we have to deal with in order to achieve it. So I say to y young people now, dream as big as you can possibly dream, and you still stand the risk of dreaming too small. So grow your imagination, expand your world, expand your mind, and your dreams will grow with it.
Mm. Oh, that is so good. You know, it reminds me, I remember, it was a mentor within my church who just he says, "You'll know your dreams aren't large enough unless they seem
Right.
impossible." Like, your dream isn't large enough unless it just seems impossible. Then you will go back and know that nothing's impossible,
Right.
right? And for me, my faith is nothing's impossible with God, right? And so, you know, that is one thing that, you're so correct in that. Your dreams, it's us that will limit our own big dreams because we'll try to rationalize. Sometimes we rationalize ourselves out of something, right? Even in the way that we think about it or the way that we think that we can get it done. So
Yeah, so my
anyway,
book has
I
epigraphs
agree.
at the beginning of each chapter, and the final
Yes.
chapter, the epigraph is almost exactly what you just said. So many of our dreams at first seem impossible, then they seem improbable, and then when we summon the will, they soon become inevitable.
Ah, that is
Yeah.
so good. So
Yeah,
good.
so
Wisdom, wisdom,
never be
wisdom.
afraid to dream big. Never be afraid.
No.
If you're succeeding at everything you do, you're dreaming too small.
Mhm. Mm, that's good.
Yeah, so
I would agree with
if
that.
as you said earlier, if what you're dreaming about doesn't seem impossible to you, you're certainly not dreaming big enough.
Not dreaming big enough. And even in the season of life I'm in, I'm still trying to I'm still making a conscious effort, and I'm doing it for my children too, so they can see that mom is still doing it at this age. I'm dreaming of things that seem impossible, and I'm speaking them out. I'm making plans towards them, you know, um, because I think, when you have young adult children, I think the biggest thing is to show them by example at this
Oh,
point, right?
absolutely.
Just stay quiet and let them see you
Right,
do it, right?
absolutely.
So mhm, I would agree. Well, let me ask you this, golf is central to your post-retirement journey. How did it become a lens through which you have explored race, class, and connection?
Just a little history real quickly in that, um, in the United States, golf golf's introduction in the US was in exclusivity. So if you think about the old world, they had royalty. They had the aristocrats, and they did hunting, fox hunting, and they played games. They did things of leisure. And the non-aristocrats, they worked. So when the New World was formed, there were these clubs
Mhm,
formed, and these clubs
mhm.
were they had the types of leisure activities that there was no royalty here in the New World in the US. So the aristocrats,
I'm
if you will, they formed these social clubs and they did these social activities. And golf came to America and was introduced into these social clubs. The first golf courses were built by clubs, the country clubs, that what we call country clubs now.
okay.
So it's a world of
Right.
exclusivity. Uh, and
Okay.
so if you think about my background, being born into abject poverty to a single mother in East Texas during the late Jim Crow era, I was born as far away from privilege as anyone could be. So it's an improbable journey that at 45, um, a senior vice president said to me, we were in Virginia, um, Jimmy, you're going back to Texas if you want to get along with the folks that you're going to be working with, that are going to be working for you. Uh, you need to start shooting something. It was, he says, and I don't care what it is, you can shoot animals or you can shoot par, but pick one. So it was
Pick
either
one good
start, either
Right.
hunting or start playing golf. So my wife picked, she
Mhm.
purchased a set of golf clubs for me and some lessons at a place in Beaumont, Texas called Games People Play. So I took golf lessons, and that started my journey. The first time I hit the ball and watched it, the first time I actually connected with the ball, because the first swings I missed.
Right, right, you
Yeah,
always miss the
and
first
then
yes,
when I
yes.
finally actually connected with the ball and watched it soar into the distant sky, it was like magic. I was hooked. I was addicted. I wanted to do that again. And so I sort of gr fell in love with the game. And as I was getting ready to retire, uh, I wanted to reconnect with our country. Early in my life, I would
Mhm,
travel across the country, go to, the back roads, the backwoods, these small towns, and just interact with people,
mhm,
and there was a great
mhm,
sense of getting to know who we were as a country. But as life grew and family came and work and career grew, didn't have a lot of time for that. So my first year of retirement, I needed a project, something to get me from a 100-mile-an-hour career to a more relaxed retirement.
mm,
So my idea was to travel the country, uh, and go to all 50 states. Originally, I was gonna go to all 50 states, play golf with strangers and with friends, 2 rounds of golf, 1 with strangers in the state, 1 with friends. That's 100 rounds. And then my wife,
mm,
gave me a book by a guy, John Sabino, that played the
mhm,
top 100 courses in the world, and I said, "Well, I'm playing 100 courses, why don't I just play the best 100 courses in the country?" And it was an interesting
mhm,
experience, Lisa, in that this kid who was born in the Jim Crow era, like I said earlier, and into poverty,
mhm,
was now
mhm.
introduced into this world of privilege. Uh, at It was the challenge of, can I get invited to all these places where people who look like me were once unwelcomed? Have we grown enough as a country to where people will still help someone achieve a dream just because they believe in the dream that the person is trying to achieve? So that was the dream. Can I get
Mhm,
invited to all of these places, places of
mhm,
exclusivity, places of privilege? Um,
mhm,
and that was the goal. So it was interesting to contrast uh, that world to the world. And my world changed a lot from the time I was born to that point, but it was still a different world. It was even a more sort of exclusive, privileged world out
mhm,
there. And one of the again, I've given you some of the my quotes in the book, but one of the things that came to me when I was at the most exclusive of the golf courses in our country, golf clubs in our country, Augusta National.
mhm,
It just occurred to me, I'd come from a world that liked almost everything, to find myself standing in a world that liked almost nothing. And just that to me, though, is also sort of the embodiment of the American dream. And
mhm.
um, your question was really around just that passion for golf becoming central. I think golf was
Right.
central in our country when you look at some of the things that led to redlining and segregation, and golf played a major role in that. So it's like, how can I
Mhm,
leverage and
mhm,
use this sport that played such a major role in that and segregating us
mhm,
to actually bring us
mhm.
together?
Bring us
Because
together,
because
connection.
what I
Yes.
found is that golf is a very unifying game. Something that
Mhm,
was used to separate
mhm,
is truly extremely unifying for 2 reasons.
mhm.
1, under the heat of any common passion, differences melt away.
Yes.
They melt away. Golf, unlike any other sport, you are spending 4 hours in close
Mhm,
contact with 3 other people. Golf uses splayed and foursomes with 3 other people, and you really get to know, even if you never said a word to each other, you would get to know each other very well. Because on the golf course, you face challenges, you face questions of integrity, you face questions of character. And so who you are eventually comes
Mm.
out during that 4 hours on the golf course. So there's no need for stereotypes because you actually intimately get to know the person. Golf is unique in that way. Uh, that amount of time and the proximity to the people you're engaged in the activity with, and then the challenges you face and how you deal with them. And so golf is, in that sense, a metaphor in itself, not just my title of the book, Playing from the Rough, but in general, it's a metaphor for life. Golf is
Mm.
hard, but you can find
Mhm.
amazing moments, and you don't have to be perfect at it to enjoy it. Life is hard, but you find some amazing moments, and you don't have to get everything right. We all will make mistakes, and you don't have to be
Yes.
perfect. In the book, I write about my mother and the love my siblings and I had for her and the impact she had on our lives, and she was by no means perfect, but we loved her
Mhm.
fiercely. Uh,
Yes.
our country is in no means perfect, but there are wonderful aspects and opportunities. And I don't know of another country, and I've traveled to a lot of them, that can compare to the opportunities we have here in our country.
I could not agree more. Could not
And
agree more
so
with you.
golf to
Yes.
me is sort of central to who we are as people, who we are as a country. Is just so there's so many comparisons and parallels, and so it just now just seems so natural to
Mhm.
me.
Mm. Really a great analogy. When you talked about golf being, that unifies, your differences are set
Right.
aside. I don't know how many times, I've heard my husband say that when he goes golfing. He goes golfing with those who have different beliefs, different, values, that kind of thing, but one thing about it
Right.
connects them. They're unified during that time of
Right.
playing the game. And I think because they're all going through, if you want to draw another analogy, is when you're all going through the same, golf also can be very
Right.
challenging, like you said. And so when you're going through the same frustration, it can humble you
Yes.
too, right? And so when you're going through all that together, I think there's a unity that comes together even more tighter. There's more of a unifying kind of emulsifier that happens. It becomes that emulsifier, right? Of a unity.
One of but one of the
Yep,
other
yeah.
things in golf is, um, you go and you play, and you could be paired with, like, you go to, say, go to Pebble Beach. You could be
Yes.
paired with the CEO of so and so, the star running back of here or there, or this global athlete. Y y it People of so many different worlds in golf can come
Yes.
together, and there aren't many activities in life where different worlds can intersect in the way they can at a golf club, on a golf course. I have met just some very, very interesting people and had amazing discussions and gained
Mhm,
perspective from random strangers that I m met that I met on a golf course.
mhm, mhm. For my husband's, 60th birthday, he treated himself to Pebble Beach, and, he actually flew out by himself. I mean, he had the, best time, but he was paired with the most interesting, individuals. There was one I heard about especially, and so when you just use that as
Yeah.
an example of connection, and I just remember just the joy, uh, that he felt because of that.
So
Yeah.
this guy reached out to me and he said, "I just had to reach out to you." And I hope he doesn't mind me telling you, so I won't, use his name, but one of the names I have to use.
Yeah, yeah.
He's a friend of Lawrence Fishburne, the actor, and he
Yes.
said that, Lawrence doesn't have an athletic bone in his body, but they were he was visiting him in England, and he was about to go out to play golf, and Lawrence, said, "I wanna go with you." And he said he was so shocked because he doesn't golf. He says and he said, "But
Right.
I just read this book about this guy that that played all these great courses, and it's just something about the golf that I wanna go out and play now."
Oh my goodness, he read
Yes.
your book.
A and so
Oh,
it was just that that sense, and then my editor from Simon& and Schuster for the book had never golfed in his life.
yes.
But when he
Yeah.
read the book, he said he went to a driving range to hit golf balls. That and so it's just there's this thing about, as I said, about golf that can really bring people together. And it's
Yes.
interesting because golf is actually an individual type of sport where it's you against the course. But but
Yes.
you
Yes.
actually interact your ability to interact with others as if it's a team and come together, and the differences, as we talked about before, melting away. It's an amazing phenomena.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, let me ask you this parallel, looking back on your ExxonMobil career as well, I'm assuming that you had well, you said you didn't pick up a golf club until you were
Yeah,
45,
I
isn't
didn't
that what
pick
I
up the
just heard
game
you
until I
say?
was 45. I played I
You're
played,
45.
like, twice in a golfing outing for work. But it
Yes.
was all I did was putt because I couldn't swing a golf club. I had no idea how to swing a golf club, but I could take that flat stick and push the ball toward the hole. That I could do.
Right. Well, I'll just turn it to this question, what have been some defining challenges that you faced, at ExxonMobil professionally or even personally? And how did that add value to Playing in the Rough? How did that add value to the book, or how did what ideas came about as you were, writing this book,
Yeah, so
Playing in the Rough?
um, career-wise, there are a couple of defining things for me in that, and it's the same in life, and, as we take this, our stock market in the country is, like, dropping precipitously, and but eventually it'll
Mhm,
go back up. And so this sort of
mhm,
relates to that. When people look, I started as an engineer at Exxon, entry-level engineer, and retired as an
mhm,
executive, having run businesses across the globe. And so people
mhm.
may look at where you start and where you end and think that it's a continuous climb, just straight up. You look at the stock market and it's here one day and it's up the next, it's a continuous climb. It's not. Um,
Mhm.
so my career wasn't either. And there was a challenge I faced where I had a really terrible boss. But I had to come to realize that the challenges that I had as a result of having a terrible boss wasn't because I had a terrible boss. It was because I failed to handle that situation of having a terrible boss well.
Um,
And so that challenge, and where that challenge comes in and answers your question, is the learning of the circumstances are the circumstances, and circumstances don't lead to failure. Your
mhm.
inability to appropriately handle that circumstance is what really leads to the outcome.
To
So
to the outcome, the
so when you
success.
face
Yep.
challenges, um how you deal with that challenge is what's gonna determine what you achieve, and in playing from the rough and trying to gain access to all these courses, of course, I faced a lot of challenges. And so just having that understanding that it's not the challenges that are going to determine whether you play all these courses and gain access to all these courses in a year. It's how you deal with those challenges that of doing that. The other thing I would mention that's related to career is I I don't have a lot of regrets. We all make mistakes, but the one of the biggest regrets I have is a situation where I treated a person poorly. The person
Mm.
had been sent to do a task and did it very poorly. And instead of just having a discussion and helping that person understand um, how to do better the next time, I let my own sense of ego and my own flaws get the best of me. And
Mm.
I treated the person poorly. I handled it very wrong. Instead of doing what I mentioned earlier, I basically humiliated him. It was more of, did you so that makes no sense to me. Are you lying or are you just that incompetent?
Ah,
And
yes,
I that
yes.
um for that, we all, as you mentioned, we talked about earlier, we all have our good days and our bad days, and sometimes we succeed and sometimes we fail.
Mhm,
But we can never
mhm.
let any of those things affect how we treat other people. And we can
Other
never
people.
forget that how we treat someone is based upon who
Mhm.
we are, not who they are.
Yes,
How we treat a
yes,
person is a reflection of what's inside of us, not what's
yes.
inside them, outside them. It's what's inside us. And so
Yes.
as I went through the journey too of playing the top 100 courses, not only about treating other people well, but when I
Mhm.
felt maybe I wasn't treated so well, having the grace to understand that it really had nothing to do with me. It was more about what they may have been experiencing on that day. And so those are lessons I think we can take, they are definitely lessons I took that mattered in my career, but also just matters in life in general and dealing with people and dealing with challenges.
Mm. I think you can cross that over not only professionally, but
Right.
even personally when you're a
Yeah.
parent even. What is the point of where is the balance of correction versus
Yeah.
humiliating the
Right.
child, right? Let alone an employee who is, working within an organization. It's how the effect is how you handle it, not what they've done.
So,
That's
yeah,
wisdom. That was good.
one of the things that happened when I was, not long after I had, uh, done that, I we had a storm. Most people will remember, Katrina
Mm.
hitting,
Yes.
uh, Louisiana, but there was another storm that came through not long after that, that hit Beaumont Texas, and
Texas. Yes.
it devastated the town, flooding and wind damage, and, um, but for work, it was an all hands on deck. We supplied that I
Mhm,
was working at the Beaumont refinery, we supplied fuel that went to all the way up the East Coast, all the way up to New York. And so
mhm,
when our plant was damaged, we had to get it back up and running. So it was all hands on deck. Uh,
mhm,
needed everybody to come into work and get this place back going. And I walk into one of the guys who was it was and I had the responsibility of getting the work done so we could get back up and running. So it was my organization doing that. And I walk into
mhm.
one of the managers that reported to me. I walked into his office to discuss something with him, and he was at his desk crying. Uh,
Mhm.
and so I had a discussion with him to understand what was going on. And what was going on was that he was there working because he was required to be at work. But his daughter, her family, his adult daughter, her family, the roof had been severely damaged at their house.
Mm.
And they were trying to still stay in the house, and he felt helpless because he had to be at work instead of helping them
Mhm.
recover. And when you have water coming through your roof and not out your faucets, that's a challenge. That's not a good state. And here's his father wanting to meet his work obligation, but also worried about his daughter and her family. And he has this dilemma, should I be
Mm.
here or should I be there? And I knew that he couldn't make that decision for himself, that I needed to help make that decision for him by saying, "Go and take care of your daughter. We'll figure this out.
Go take every Yep.
We will
Yes.
figure it out here. Go and take care of your daughter." And I didn't solve his problem, but
Mm.
I empowered him to be able to fix the problem. And that is the part from a professional understanding of realizing that the people who come in every day to make
Mm.
sacrifices to meet your corporate objective are putting aside all the things in life that are challenging them so that they could be there to do the things that you've put a priority on. And it just helped me understand the sacrifices that the people who commit themselves to our endeavors in the corporate world are making in order to show up every day to do that. And so I think that's a lesson that I took and learned once I realized what I had done to that other person. It sensitized me to think more about the
Mhm.
sacrifices that
Mhm.
people are making and how we should deal with the people who are making
Yes.
those sacrifices because of the priorities we set in the profession in the workplace.
Mm. That's really good. I had a guest on yesterday. I recorded a podcast yesterday, with a guest of a woman who truly has been an executive coach to some of your top firms and, in the country, top 100, companies and a lot of C-suite executives, and she always starts with coaching them with them understanding their own pillars of
Um,
success. And she starts with their families, their health, their faith. Then she goes into the pillars of professional goals and things of that nature, right? But she said exactly what you said. Um, she says, a great leader, a successful leader I have found when she takes, inventory is those who really care about the humanistic
right.
side of their employees. Because what they are realizing is the correlation between high productivity and also caring about knowing that that employee feels comfortable to bring the humanistic side
Yes.
even to work.
Their whole
And
we want
and and
people to
that
be able to bring their whole self to work. Their
their
whole self
whole
to
self,
work. Yes.
WHOLE. Yes.
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 Their entire who they are. And that's I was listening to a podcast with, uh, Malcolm Gladwell and Kenya Burris,
Mhm, mhm,
and they were talking about the fact that, as African Americans, we do code switching because we live in one world and then have to interact in another world. It's just the way with
mhm.
any society where you're the minority, where you are the minority, you have to uh, realize that you're in the majority's world, and in order to relate in that world, you got to figure out how to fit in. And for us, that's the code switching term of what we know will be helpful in interactions in that world, but that for all of us, uh, we always have to deal with trying to figure out what that code switching is, what it requires to fit to fit in. And we're at our best, though, when we're taking all of the energy we have and putting it to the task that needs to be done. And the more the
Mhm.
energy we take away from that to figure out how to fit in, of what part of ourselves we can bring to the table, the less the less
Mhm.
energy we have to focus on the task that needs to be done. And so when we allow people
Mm.
to bring their whole self to work, they can put all of their energies toward the task that they're
Toward
doing,
task
the
at
task
hand.
at hand, as opposed to having to try to figure out how to fit in and how what to say and what not to say and what's appropriate and what's not
Yes.
appropriate. Just just be
Yes.
when you feel free to just be yourself, then all of your
Yes.
imagination, your creativity, your intelligence, your ingenuity, it all goes into accomplishing those objectives.
Absolutely. Yes, we were talking yesterday how important it is for being,
Yeah.
not doing.
Being.
Just
Being
being,
allows you
right?
the more you can be,
Yes.
the better you are at doing.
The better you are at doing. The doing
Of
comes out
being,
of being,
exactly.
right? It flows
Yes.
out of being,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah. That's absolutely. I have just a couple more questions, and then I'm going to respect your time, but you
And
listed faith as a topic that you're comfortable discussing. How has your faith influenced the way you lead, the way you compete, the way you serve, different aspects of your life?
um, so and it's important that we talk about sort of faith, as opposed to, say, religion or something of that nature. Faith to me uh, uh, is that belief in something greater than yourself and a willingness to submit to that belief and to
Mhm,
prioritize the things in your life based upon that belief. And so faith is what
mm,
allows you to understand that no matter how hard the challenges are, no matter how difficult the days are, that you are equipped with everything you need to be able to overcome it because that's the promise of your faith. You are equipped no matter how hard it is. If you're facing it, you have everything you need to overcome it. You just got to believe and rely upon those beliefs and find a way because there is a way, there is a pathway. And so everything we talked about today is truly grounded in that faith that there is something greater than us that is not separate from us, but is outside us and within us, that is there to give us the power, the strength to overcome whatever challenges we face. And that's just
mhm,
integrated into my life. I saw it within my mother. Just it wasn't whatever you face, figure out a way. There is a way. It's up to you to find it. And that faith that there's someone with the master plan that you
mhm,
submit to,
mhm,
you will find those
mhm.
pathways.
Mm, that's good. That's really good. And, just based off the name of this podcast, what does living an uncompromised life mean to you at this stage of your journey?
Be firm on your principles and flexible on your preferences. Firm on your principles, flexible
Principles.
on your
Excellent.
preferences, and live a life
Mhm.
that allows you to acquire the wisdom to know the difference between the 2.
Mm, that's good. Give me a quick example.
So My principle principle is that, um, integrity. Uh, you have to, be honest, be truthful, uh, do things the best, give your best to the things that you do. That's 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 a principle. That's you can't compromise on that. How you go about doing something, which way you do it, and, uh, those types of things, those are preferences. I may
Mhm,
prefer, uh, to lead an activity. Uh, I may
mhm,
prefer to be in the pilot seat, but that's not a principle. That's a preference for me. I,
mhm,
um, I may prefer, in a professional setting, I may prefer to have this job over here and that job over there. That's my preference. But is that a hill to die on? That's a preference.
mm,
But if you ask me
mhm,
to do something dishonestly, to lie about something, to cover up something,
mm,
that's a lack of integrity. That's a principle that you can't violate.
mhm, mhm,
Benefit of the doubt should always flow, in my opinion, in the direction of the least power. So
mhm,
there was a person who I felt lied to me. We had an investigation. The investigation said, "Yep, we agree with you. The person lied, but we can't prove it definitively." My principle is the benefit of the doubt flows in the direction of the least power. I had more power than that person. I could fire that person because I believed
mhm,
that they lied to me. But
mhm,
integrity is unless I know absolutely certain that they lied, then I
mhm,
can't fire. Even though I was advised to fire him, nope, not gonna do it.
mhm.
I stood on my even though my preference would have been to fire that person, I stood on my
Right.
principle
Stood on
that
your principle. Mhm.
the benefit of the doubt should flow in the direction of the least power, because that's all wrapped up in the principle of integrity, in the principle of
Oh.
humanity. So,
Mm.
that would be another actual example.
I told my podcast guest yesterday, the one I recorded yesterday, I mean, to have 2 back in the road that I just wanna do a part 2 with, is an understatement. Just thank you so much for today. I could continue on with you, but again, in respect of time and having integrity with our time here, um,
So the
I definitely just wanna say thank you, for just sharing. Not only will it fill the cup of the listeners, but you filled my cup today. You just confirmed that I need to keep doing what
Right,
I'm doing,
yeah,
right? And change those things along the way when the Lord tells me to change them. So, but just thank you. Your presence, you speaking about the topics of just life have just been a blessing.
no,
So, thank you.
thank you, Lisa, for the opportunity to share my story.
Absolutely, absolutely, and hopefully you will accept a part 2 from me when we contact
Absolutely.
you, so
Thank you.